Hey, Sycamore View family and friends, every Tuesday and Thursday at 10 o'clock, I'm releasing a devotional piece just to be a word of encouragement, a word of hope to you. If you've missed any of these, you go to our YouTube channel and there's a whole archive. You can check these out and hopefully they'll be a blessing to you and you can share them with others. A few years ago, back in 2014, I went up to Barrow, Alaska. I ended up writing a book on this experience, and the whole reason I went up there was because I had seen the research that there's this community. There are many communities above the Arctic Circle who will go 65 to 75 days every winter without seeing the sun. So they live in darkness. There may be a little twilight that comes over the land from like 10 to 2, but they don't see the sun for over 2 months. And this can have an effect on your psyche, how you go about life, how you think about life. And the research shows that there's a peak for depression. There's also a peak for suicide attempts in some of these places above the Arctic Circle, but it's not in the period of darkness. It's when people re-enter into the light. It's when the sun comes back that it's hard to re-engage. And sometimes we find ourselves in these seasons of uncertainty, these seasons of darkness. So when I went up to Barrow, I went up there for 11 days. It's the northernmost point of the United States. And I met with people. And I would hear testimony after testimony every day. I met with public school teachers. I met with people who hosted radio shows, librarians, people who own restaurants. And here are two words that showed up over and over again that help people. One was roots. People who had deep roots were some of the healthiest people in the community. And the other word, and I want to talk about this just for a moment today, was the word rhythm. That you had to have a rhythm. In the wintertime, you had to have a rhythm that could keep you active and moving, that there's exercise and there's a commitment to community. But then in the summertime, when it's the sun's out almost all the time, 2 a.m., kids are out riding their bikes because it's broad daylight, you had to have a rhythm to try to rest. Henry Nouwen's a guy who wrote a lot on spiritual disciplines and spirituality. He's been a close companion of mine, even though he died years ago. I've read a lot of this guy's stuff, and there's an article I read over 20 years ago by Henry Nouwen, and he talked about the Jesus rhythm or the Jesus paradigm, and I go back to this regularly. I've preached on this multiple times. I lead our staff through this discussion, usually at least once a year. In Luke chapter 6, in verse 12, Jesus honors solitude, where he goes in prayer with God for an entire night. In chapter 6, verse 13, Jesus cultivates community. He comes out of that prayer, he comes out of that solitude, and he calls his 12. These 12 men who are going to be with him pretty much everything he did all the way up to the death on the cross. And then after that, he enters into ministry where he heals the sick, drives out demons, and then he preaches one of the most famous sermons we've ever heard. Jesus goes from solitude to community to ministry. Solitude, prayer time with God. Community, where there was a commitment to meaningful relationships. And ministry, where there was a commitment to service, compassion, justice. And especially in times of uncertainty, we've got to have this rhythm that keeps us connected to the rhythm of Jesus. Because if there's a rhythm that worked for Jesus, that Jesus handed on to his apostles and then handed on to the church, it needs to be a rhythm that works for us too. So I want to encourage you in the days and weeks to come. It's not that you need to spend a third of your life in solitude, a third of your life in community, a third of your life in ministry. But think, okay, how am I connecting with God? And then take seriously, how am I connecting in meaningful relationships? Sending text messages, phone calls, FaceTime, that you're staying connected. And how are you committing and connecting to God through forms of service and justice and compassion right now? That the church, we can do this. That you may not have any rhythm when it comes to dancing at all, but you can move at the rhythm of God. So let's do it. Galatians 5 talks about keeping in step with the Spirit. So even in this season, let's keep in step with the Spirit. Solitude, community, ministry, and service.